You set foot on foreign soil. Only this land isn't ruled by any country or government. In this land we celebrate music. In this land we celebrate games. In this land we celebrate those who compose video game music. Welcome to the VG Embassy. Welcome and thanks for tuning in to another episode of the VG Embassy. This is a show centered around video game music and the amazing online community of fans and podcasters that enjoy it. My name's Ed, and on each episode I'll take the role of Prime VGM Minister and invite a guest VG Ambassador onto the show to share with us their own video game music culture. Or I may share a part of my culture on a solo show. And like I promised at the end of the last solo show, which was 2 weeks ago, I do have a special guest VG Ambassador. Actually, two special guest VG Ambassadors. One was a surprise guest, which I'm super excited about. We have Chris Steenerson and Matt Sargent from the video game music podcast VGJam here with us today. We're going to be talking about some music and some amazing gameplay of point-and-click adventure games, and I'm super, super excited to talk about this today. Chris and Matt, how are you guys doing?
Hey, good.
Doing great, man. Doing great.
So, Chris, you and I have been talking about doing this show for quite a while now, and I was actually super jazzed when you brought up this topic because it's one of my favorite types of games. And we did a show on Pixel Tunes Radio about point-and-click adventures, and I had a great time doing it. And even at the end of that show, we said there's so much room for like a volume 2 because so many of these games have incredible music and incredible story. And so when you asked me if I wanted to do one, I was totally jumping at the chance to. So what's your history with point-and-click adventures? Why did you want to bring this theme to the VG Embassy?
I don't know. I liked playing them when I was younger. I remember playing Maniac Mansion on the NES was probably the first one I ever played, and then I, found other LucasArts games. Someone had Secret of Monkey Island, and I played that, and it kind of like wowed me. That game was amazing looking and sounding, and I just kind of, fell in love with the genre from pretty much those two games, and try to play those when I can.
I kind of like them because you can digest them in short kind of bursts. It's not like an action game where you have to sit there and run through a level and spend at least, a half an hour, 45 minutes just perfecting your run through the level before you can get on to the next one. With these, it's kind of like picking up a book. You can read a couple chapters, you can read a whole, 2 hours worth, but you can kind of fit them into your lifestyle if you have a busy one.
Yeah, there's definitely something book-like about them. There's no Twitch gameplay really happening in these games. I don't know about actually, I haven't played a lot of Sierra games. I've heard things about this, but maybe there's some of that in there. But and most of the ones I've played, it's very much kind of like at your own pace sort of thing. Yeah,
for sure. So before we get into kind of like the ins and outs of the types of games that we're talking about here, why don't you guys tell me a little bit about your VGM podcast, VGJam? I mean, I've listened to, you've had technically 2 episodes, but some of them are kind of broken up into multiple episodes, and you have a really neat concept where you listen to video game music and then extract ideas from those songs to create your own original musical pieces based on them. So how did you guys come up with the idea for that?
Matt and I have been friends for a long time, and he has always been very into music. I've kind of just dabbled a lot. Matt has done it professionally for several years. As we got back together in the same town again, we occasionally would get together and I would come over to his place and maybe record a guitar riff or something for something he was working on. And it was kind of like really the only excuse we had to hang out. And it was so sporadic that it happened that I kind of felt like something fun we could do was to dig into the VGM thing and try to sort of, appreciate that music and also kind of do our own creative thing with it too. So So yeah, like you said, we listen to music on the podcast, pull out the things we like about the songs we listen to, and then we try to kind of piece those things together into our own composition inspired by that. So yeah, Matt is the real pro. I'm kind of just the noodler, but we have a lot of fun doing it.
Music theory nerd here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just echoing what Chris said. It's fun to dissect the kind of music that we grew up with, the video game music we grew up with, and create an original concept from all these pieces that we've dissected and all these tracks that we've dissected through, even the mid 80s until, modern music. So that's kind of, our idea when we're, creating the podcast. Each podcast is a different kind of mood or genre that we look at.
Yeah. Like you said, we've only done a couple of them. They're pretty labor intensive, so our release schedule is kind of like when we get one done, and so far that's like biannually or something. I don't know. Right. It's very, very sparse. Lots of time in between, but right. We hope people subscribe and listen to it as it comes out. So
sure.
Yeah, and it's cool because at the end you have this little song baby that you've given birth to, and the audience gets to see the conception of that baby, which is kind of gross when you talk about it like that. But, you get to see where all the ideas came from. And then when the audience listens to it, they can kind of say, oh, I can hear that from there and that from there. And I also like the fact that you guys consciously use both chiptune and the more modern, like Red Book Audio live instrumentation, and make sure to kind of combine elements from both eras of video game music. And you're not just picking from one or the other. So
yeah, that's definitely something that I've really wanted to bring to it, is to like I want to look at the modern stuff, but I also definitely want to pull in the cool, like older, the chippier stuff. It's I don't know, the technology around making that stuff work and sound the way that it did has its own thing that I think is amazing. So like I definitely want to bring those influences into the music.
Yeah, for sure. So, point and click adventures. Let's just, for the people that aren't familiar, which might not be very many, but let's talk a little bit about the types of games that we're going to be discussing tonight. Do you want to maybe give us a brief overview of your experience with point and clicks and what they are? I
guess to describe the genre, they are games that are largely kind of a puzzle, usually they're usually very story based. They usually require you to solve puzzles via like dialogue trees. You pick different things you might be saying to different characters in response to things that they say to you. And you also frequently are picking up lots of items that you would point and click on the screen using different verbs, pick up or talk to or look at, etc. And you'll have this inventory full of items, and then you will kind of use those on other things within the world that you're walking around in the game to sort of, progress in the story.
Yeah.
My personal experience with them came from the Nintendo, oddly. It seems like a weird platform to start with one, but like Maniac Mansion on the NES, like I played that game and fell in love with it as a rental. That one was great. And then, I just kind of found my way into a lot of the Lucas ones and then a few of the more modern games. And also like there were a few other things on the NES that we'll talk about later that also were kind of like in the genre that pulled me in too. But yeah, it's kind of where I am with it. What is your background with point and clicks, Ed?
Yeah, I'm actually very similar to you. I owned Maniac Mansion when I was a kid. I think I saw it in a Nintendo Power and put it on a Christmas or birthday list or something and was gifted it without even having played it before. So that was really my first experience with that kind of game. And I didn't have a Windows computer until like the end of the Windows 95 era. So I missed out on a lot of those old DOS games and a lot of the really prototypical point and click adventure games. So Maniac Mansion was kind of like the only game. I thought it was kind of just a unique game and that there weren't any other games like that out there until, getting into like Windows 98 and then where DOS games started becoming nostalgic and kind of throwback. And I started learning about, King's Quest and a lot of these older games that I completely missed out on. And so I guess my experience with these games has been more on the modern side. And I think you're going to see a lot of that in the games that I've chosen to represent the genre in this show as we go forward.
Gotcha.
And a lot of them, I think the modern point-and-click adventures and the modern adventure games have kind of dropped a lot of the word-based navigation and the verb navigation, and because there's more capabilities, higher resolution screens, fully voiced audio, there's a lot of different ways to kind of get that same gameplay but kind of update it for modern audiences. So I want to talk about that as we go through the show as well.
Yeah, cool.
And of course, music. I mean, music is integral to these games because there's not shooting and explosion and tons of gameplay sound effects, because mainly you're just kind of, your character is just kind of standing there waiting for you to do something. And even when you're doing something, the character might still just be standing there watching you try to rub two things together and figure out if they work or not.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of room for the music to kind of show off and become another character in the game. So that's why a lot of these songs are so special to the game.
Yeah, that's cool. I had not really thought about it like that, but that makes a ton of sense, because it is sort of like you're sort of there idle. The game has to be able to not kind of progress and still have something going on. Yeah. The music is keeping it going.
Yeah, it's like dead air on radio. You need something to fill that gap, and it better be something that's going to interest you. So,
yeah.
With that said, do you want to move into our first song of the day?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so what do we got coming up?
Okay, this is the title theme from the CD-ROM version of The Secret of Monkey Island. There's a number of composers on it, but I believe the primary composer is Michael Land, but also Barney Jones, Patrick Mundy, and Andrew Newell.
All right, we'll be right back.
That was the title theme from the CD version of The Secret of Monkey Island on the PC in 1990, composed by Barney Jones, Michael Z. Land, Patrick Mundy, and Andy Newell. And this is probably one of my favorite adventure games, also probably one of my favorite games, period. My first experience with this game was at a friend's house, and I did not have a PC yet. I was playing mostly games on the NES, I think. I can't remember if the Super Nintendo was out at this point yet or not, but going over and playing this game at my friend's house kind of blew my mind. Like, they had this, new, multimedia PC with a CD-ROM and stereo speakers, and that was the thing. And to see graphics that were 256 colors, and to hear CD audio coming from a game it was incredible. was just a game changer.
It's almost like playing a cartoon, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, you would not see something like that on the NES, but it was super cool. So the quality blew me away. The kind of the mood and the sense of adventure in that game and in that song really like kind of captured my imagination. It's such a funny and great game. That song in particular is interesting. It's got that kind of reggae thing going on, which is cool. It sounds sort of like Central or South American with that sort of woodwind fluty kind of thing that's going on in it.
Yeah, almost like a pan flute.
Yeah, pan flute sort of sound. I don't know what it is about pan flutes, but like that's one of those one of those sounds that I have a weakness to. I don't know what it is.
It's one of the most used sounds whenever you're using like the general MIDI sound set anyway. So they just use it to great effect in this soundtrack.
I mean, if it does the job,
Exactly.
And towards the end of that song, that's almost a cheat because it's almost a different song there because it is transitioning from like that's the very beginning of the game. You're seeing like a title screen with like credits. It's this long shot of the island at night. It's really cool. Once it plays through that, it transitions to the actual first scene of the game where you're Guybrush Threepwood, the mighty pirate, seeking your fame and fortune, completely like oblivious to anything that's going on, and having this discussion with a blind guy who is the lookout of the island. The game is good.
Yeah,
it is very funny. But yeah, it's a very cool game. Have you played Secret Monkey Island, Ed?
I have. I think I was introduced to it on the. I don't think they were remakes, but it was kind of like a reboot of the series that came out on like WiiWare.
Okay, yeah.
If you remember, so they were like updated 3D, but it was like a whole different story. It takes place after all of the Monkey Islands that were on DOS were released. But after I played those, I went back and played the original ones as well.
Yeah.
First thing I wanted to mention about the music, though, is that I really appreciate that they knew the music was so strong because even when they ported this game onto CD, they still just basically upgraded the MIDI instruments and kept the same arrangement and just put it on a CD, and it still sounds absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, that's true.
They could have used live instrumentation or some real performance on this, but they decided to stick with the stuff that was on DOS, just a little higher fidelity.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it because I think the music was so well loved originally anyway that this didn't do so much that it would piss off the people that were really appreciating the old ad-lib sound card or the old general MIDI stuff.
Right.
But this just has a nice richness and a depth to it that makes it feel good even within the context of those older games. So
yeah. I recently went back and listened to, I think it must have been an ad-lib version of it or something. Or I think there was also an Amiga version of it that I listened to some of. And I had no familiarity with those at all. I completely came up on the CD version. But those were interesting, and I could, definitely like, I was like, oh, these are pretty much the same songs. You could hear some instruments sound more prominent in those versions than do in the CD version.
Yeah.
But the songwriting was there. Like, it was good. Like, you're totally right. It was solid to begin with. And, this is just kind of like putting some extra polish on that.
And I really think that Monkey Island series became so popular just because the quality of the writing.
Yeah.
And, this is where like Ron Gilbert, Tim Schafer kind of put themselves on the map as far as writing goes, because there wasn't a single line of dialogue in this game that A, wasn't completely important to the characterization and the plot of the game, but B, didn't have you also falling off of your chair in stitches and laughter.
Yeah.
Games like when I grew up on the Nintendo, there were never games that had this much dialogue. And if it was poorly translated Japanese stuff with no punctuation. Mm-hmm. And here we are with, perfectly fluent English and people trading barbs and word puns and wordplay, and it was just it was magical for me because I love like Douglas Adams and a lot of the comedy novelization writers out there, and this just kind of clicked with all of the stuff that I used to read throughout grade school and high school. So it was very magical, and I remember seeking out a lot of like Tim Schafer and Rob Gilbert's other games after I played through these and experiencing the same kind of joy and wonder at the writing and dialogue in those as well.
Yeah. Ron Gilbert's he's a great writer. The game's interesting in that like the influences from it were the Pirates of the Caribbean theme park ride. The whole game has this sort of like theme park meta thing going on that the island that you start on is like this desert. I mean, it's like totally deserted. There's some pirates just kind of hanging around, but like there's this sort of analog to like the commercialism of a theme park. And as you know, that sort of thing has worn out, like the
novelty of piratism is kind of worn off at that point in the world.
Yes, the novelty is worn out, and you know, your Guybrush there trying to like insert yourself into like this thing that you think is going to be this great amazing thing, but it is just kind of downplayed nothing. But it's, you know, the premise of it is very funny, and you know, obviously Ron Gilbert is a good writer, and you know, he was pulling from these good like influences. I was reading also like that outside of Pirates of the Caribbean, he was also like influenced by this book called On Stranger Tides, which I read like the first chapter of the sample and thought it was pretty fun, which is this kind of like Indiana Jones like pirate sort of voodoo thing. Like it's all the kind of the themes that are in that same book. Like Disney bought this book so that they could make a Pirates of the Caribbean movie based on it. They kind of just like sort of bastardized the whole thing. But yeah, I haven't actually seen that movie. Maybe it's great, but that's from my understanding from doing a little reading up on it. But anyway, Ron Gilbert's great, and the stuff that he has written along the years has been entertaining at the very least.
Yeah. Kind of like the godfather of the modern point-and-click adventure, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Matt, any thoughts on the music of the game before we move on to the next one?
Pretty much reiterating what you guys have already said. I really like what Chris said, the reggae style. I like the actual organ. I know I'm mentioning instruments and being specific, but you know, that's a good point you made. I didn't realize the actual music didn't change that much from the was it the PC version or DOS version to the CD-ROM version? Is that what you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, like the floppy disk version versus the CD version.
Yeah. And it you're right. They could have had an orchestra and all that stuff, and it's so interesting to hear unchanged or not changed that much. And I think that it worked really well. I can visualize Guybrush. Is that his name?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I remember the scenes with him in it and everything. And it's I don't know. I just think the music really. All these years, I haven't played the game since the 90s. I don't know about you guys, but I haven't played it since those days in the 90s. But I still remember the music because it just the music tells a story in itself. I think in this game, it tells a story by
for sure
itself. Like you mentioned, like the radio example and everything else. But the music, it sounds so good by itself, but it sounds great with the game as well. And I think that's what's important. When you can do both of that. These composers knew what they were doing. They really knew how to write the music in that sense of telling the story, with and without the game.
Exactly. So I think this is a really good track to start off with for the show because A, it's super iconic. B, it's kind of like that sweet spot right in the middle of point-and-click adventures where the music really started to become kind of an important character in the game. And I think my next track is a really good complement to it because this is a game that was just released, I think, a month and a half ago from the date of this recording. And it's got a fantastic soundtrack, and it's definitely a huge character in the game itself. So we're going to listen to Schoolyard Strangler from the game After Party. This came out on the PC, like I said, in 2019, composed by Andrew Warman, aka Scientific. Guys, you might remember him from the Oxenfree episode. We kind of talked about him at length. This is a game by Night School Studio, the follow-up, spiritual sequel, I guess, as it were, to the game Oxenfree. So let's hit it. We'll be right back. back. That was Schoolyard Strangler from the game After Party. It came out on PC in 2019, composed by Andy Rohrman, aka Scientific. Love this track. It's probably one of the most popular tracks from the game so far, at least from what I can tell on social media. I follow the composer on Twitter because, I loved his soundtrack from Oxenfree. And so he tweeted out a couple links to some of his tracks after he released the album on Bandcamp. And he was like, guys, I don't even know what genre this is. Like, he was going by the directives of what the game designers wanted him to create. And so the game takes place in Hell, and basically Hell has a lot of different bars. And so your characters visit lots of different bars in Hell. And so they wanted him to envision and create music that would be played at a bar or a nightclub that is in Hell. And so he came up with music that sounds a lot like this. And he's like, what would you call this? So I tweeted back at him. I was like, well, what about Horror Step? And he was like, wow, that's a really good, that fits it perfectly. And I was telling you guys while you were listening to the track, and I think you guys kind of agreed. Like, I wouldn't be able to place this in any particular genre. Would you? That genre that exists?
It's a weird mashup. Yeah. But I think you definitely nailed it. That is the new genre that it has created. Yeah. Horror Step.
Well, what'd you guys think of the song, first off?
I dug it. It was super cool. That I really liked that kind of synth thing that it was doing, that lead sound. And that drum kit was crazy. It sounds almost like it's very live. It sort of sounds lo-fi. It sounds like there's no reverb on it or something. It's in a very small space that they recorded that or something.
Yeah. I think that's because the game uses positional audio.
Oh.
So there are speakers in the game, so as you walk from one side of the room to the other, the song will shift depending on where the speakers are in relation to your characters. So that's all done in kind of post inside the game's audio engine itself.
The reverb is in the game. That's cool.
So he probably made it very dry to begin with, so that when there's reverb, it doesn't sound too, over reverb.
That's very interesting.
In the game,
yeah, that really makes me want to play it and hear it in the context of the game. That's cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
It's kind of fun to listen to the soundtrack in the game because, like we said before, in these adventure games, there's not a lot going on action-wise, so you really are able to kind of fully listen to the music in all of its glory as you're playing through the game. But especially when you have music like this where it kind of emulates where it's coming from. Like, the music is actually playing for the characters in the game. It's not like Mega Man where he's going through Flashman stage and the player is hearing the music, but you don't think Mega Man's really hearing the music. Like, with this, the characters are shouting over the bass and stuff. So it's a really cool kind of way to build music into your game.
In the context of the game. That's cool.
Yeah.
I like it. Huh.
The game plays very similarly to Oxenfree, and I know we kind of talked about that on that show. So Night School Studio has created 2 games so far, this being the second, and the games are very similar to each other in that there's not a lot of item gathering and not a lot of using one thing with another. It's a lot of conversation and taking bits of conversation, and the information you're getting from these conversations are kind of like your items. And so people will tell you things and you use what they've told you to react in certain ways, to do different missions and such, because basically you're a pair of friends who are in college just about to graduate, and both of you find yourselves in Hell. You don't know how you died. You don't feel you belong there. You feel like you were good people in your life, and so you have to figure out how to get back to the living world, and you are told through these demons that inhabit Hell, who are all just like you and me. They just have horns on their head and glowing eyes. So much of the fact that being a demon and torturing people is their job. It's like a 9-to-5 job. So you are tortured between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. But then 5 p.m. to the next morning, you are free to do whatever you want and just kind of wander around Hell and visit stores and bars and stuff. So it's a really interesting concept.
Listening to the Horror Step in the club. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So the mission is to beat Satan at a drinking game in order to leave Hell. and get back to the world of the living.
Interesting.
Satan is having this gigantic party that lasts for like 300 years. So the first part of the game is visiting these bars and trying to get the influence of people that are accepted at the party so that you can get this ticket to get into the party, because it's not like, it's like an exclusive club, so you have to be quote unquote somebody to get into the party.
Gotcha.
So that's where all these conversations come in. You kind of have to build up your influence or help the right people to do the right things. It's a different kind of game, and I don't think I was expecting it, but there are definitely multiple playthroughs, so you can take a certain route through the first playthrough, and then there's a very different kind of route you can take for the second and probably even third playthroughs. So I haven't yet been through the game a second time, but I think I have a feeling I'll probably grow to appreciate it a little bit more once I start seeing the different branching paths and how they kind of all interact with each other.
Gotcha.
But that being said, even though I didn't like it as much as Oxenfree, it's still an awesome game. Andy Rohrman wrote a fantastic soundtrack for it. Lots of really cool club bangers, but then a lot of really kind of like ethereal, environmental stuff that you might have heard from like the Oxenfree soundtrack as well.
Sounds interesting. Yeah, I definitely want to check this game out. It's kind of been on my to-play list in the back of my mind after I think I heard you mention it on another podcast before. I did like Oxenfree, so I'll have to check this one out soon.
Yeah, I think it was on the Oxenfree podcast that we actually, doing research on the game, while we were recording, we actually found out that After Party was in development. We saw a trailer.
Oh.
So that's like where Jordan and I first were like, oh my God, we need to get this. So I pre-ordered it immediately after recording. And like day one when it came out on the Epic Games Store, I was like, all right, playing this one. And I did. I had fun with it. So
awesome.
Any other thoughts before we move on to our next track?
The little orchestra stab at the end was like a cool piece of punctuation. I thought, like, you had mentioned that, and I actually had written down like to mention that like that little stab at the end was cool. So
yes, the lo-fi orchestra hits.
Lo-fi orchestra hits. Yeah.
And he's really good at kind of mixing very disparate elements in music and kind of all making them feel like they fit together pretty well. So one of his trademarks.
Yeah, definitely doing it with the chants and the drums and the synth and that thing. Yeah.
All right, man. What do we got coming up next?
Let's see. The next track we've got is another title screen song. This is the title theme from Shadowgate from 1989 on the NES, and that's composed by Hiroyuki Masauno.
All right, we'll be right back.
You just heard the title theme from Shadowgate in 1989 on the NES, composed by Hiroyuki Masuno. This was a game that I really enjoyed, also a rental. I I did not own too many NES games, but I rented a whole bunch of them. So this is one that was a repeat rental for me. I don't know, that title theme sort of just captured my imagination, and there's so much like mood to it, and it's so mysterious, and it's, I don't know, there's something super cool about it that just pulls me into the game and kind of the wonder of the whole thing. Sort of like, I mean, Monkey Island did that with its title theme too. I guess that's maybe a hallmark of a good title theme, is that it sort of, it puts you in a mood and makes you kind of wonder what else is going to go on in this world.
Yeah. So Hiroyuki Masano used to work for Kemco, and especially around then, back in the late 80s, early 90s, he was working on almost all of those kind of point-and-click adventure games that Kemco put out. So there was Shadowgate, The Uninvited, I think, which was the sequel to it, and then Deja Vu. And I noticed especially in Deja Vu, where he has this great knack of writing in like a film noir style, very smoky and bluesy with elements of jazz, and he never rushes his songs. He's not afraid to just let notes kind of draw out and use a lot of negative space in there.
Yeah.
And that was unlike a lot of stuff that you heard on the NES, especially the Japanese composers, because they're all like, run as fast as you can, put as many notes in a measure as you can. And Masano's just kind of sitting there like, no, man, just plink a couple keys here and there, and people will dig it, and people have dug it, and especially, you as well. So
yeah.
But I really like his stuff. He's also written music for like Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle, so he can do like the really cartoony kind of hoppy platformer kind of stuff, but then he can also really kind of slow down and do these very kind of mature point-and-click adventures soundtracks that are very unique for the NES.
Right, yeah. I had not thought about that sounding noir. I mean, I played Deja Vu, and it's definitely noir all over the place.
Yeah.
But actually, once you said that, and thinking about the tune of the Shadowgate, it definitely kind of has a similar sort of noir thing going on. It is like there is a lot of like room there, a lot of space to those notes. But I loved this game. It took a few rentals, I think, for me to find my way all the way through it. I have a feeling, I have a vague memory of looking at Nintendo Power to figure out some of it. But it came from, like, they called them the Mac Venture series of games, which was like Deja Vu, Uninvited, Shadowgate. They were all sort of programmed with the same sort of, like, development application, where it was just kind of like these cards on the screen. Like, you had, like, different little windows with each thing.
Yeah, it was called Hypercard.
Hypercard, okay, yeah, that's right. I've heard of that. You have one little corner of the screen, which is your window into the world, and you also have this sort of like little map at the bottom that represents the places you can go within that room, and your whole inventory and stuff. And I remember being in middle school, like, using like a notebook full of graph paper and just drawing these little mazes and reproducing like those different little screen grabs from the different positions that you would find yourself in, the different little rooms. I kind of like, imagined my way through my own little versions of these things. But yeah, it was a cool game. There was a remake of it a few years back.
Yeah,
played that one. It was fairly decent, I think, but something about it, I don't know. I feel like it lost something that the original had, but that's probably just because I'm old. They're fun little games. Kind of an oddity on the NES, I feel like, having something that was so, at least in the US, I don't know, maybe there was more like that in Japan or in Europe, but something that was so like menu based and kind of clicky. Everything was very platformery and actiony over here, I feel like. I
think especially in Japan, this was more like the stuff that was coming out on like the PC-98, the Sharp X68000, all those visual novels.
Yeah.
That would feel right at home to Japanese players, maybe not so much on the NES, but to American players, it was like this was a brand new way of experiencing games, especially to console gamers. I mean, PC people, sure. This kind of almost blends a little bit of like the dungeon crawler aspect with the first person view.
Yeah.
And then a little bit more of the adventure game aspect where you're collecting items and not really battling enemies so much. But this is the first game that we've featured so far where you can actually die in the game.
Yeah, you can die a lot.
Yeah. And especially like doing things that aren't like necessarily dumb. Like you can just accidentally use the wrong item on the wrong thing, or not use an item with another item before you use it on something, and it will just, by some happenstance, it will figure out a way that you would die. So.
Right. Or read a book and fall through a hole in the floor for no apparent reason.
Right,
There's just weird booby traps sometimes in that game. And like there's like the persistent like urgency of having these torches that were consistently like burning out, that you would have to like find other torches and relight to keep light going.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember that being kind of tricky. And recently I think I have a version of this in Steam, which is kind of a emulated version of the old Mac version. And I think it was even more aggressive in that game, in that version of the game. Those torches would just burn out all the time, and you're in the dark. Like, I think in the Nintendo version, you might just die when the torch went out. But I think in that game, like in that version, you could still like walk around for some reason. Maybe that was a quality of life thing that they decided to put in the Nintendo. But
I remember on the NES when you ran out of light, it would give you this little wall of text where it's like you feel around in the dark and you feel like a slimy wall or something, and then all of a sudden an animal attacks you and you die. Like it would just tell you that you died. Whereas I guess that they didn't want the gamer to have that much confusion. But you know, that whole torch mechanic was just the developer's way of trying to build in replay value so that you're not just wandering around infinitely trying to figure out what to do. You have to do things in order. If you take too long, you're going to run out. There's a finite number of torches in the game, so you run out of torches, you're screwed. You know, there's no way back, so you got to start all over again.
Probably a mechanic that I think Ron Gilbert probably would have had issue with.
Yes, definitely.
He really avoided those.
Not exactly entertaining.
No. But I mean, I can kind of appreciate the urgency that it puts in there. I think that, I don't know, there's something kind of interesting about it, but at the same time, I don't know, it might not be fun.
So Matt, I heard you kind of analyzing the track in the background as we were listening to it. Any thoughts on this one?
You know, I was thinking the difference between this track and say the other tracks that I grew up with. I have not officially played Shadowgate, but the music, you know, the chiptunes and the music that I grew up with what I was comparing to in my head was like the Mega Man series and how fast the notes were, like what you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. And
how much more moody this is and how slower it is, and it's still very effective. That's kind of what I gathered from this, was that although I've never played the game, I've seen it played a couple of times, but it was really, really interesting to hear how slow the notes were, whether the bass notes or whether it's the melody or whatever, and you're getting through the game with this. But that's really what stood out to me the most, was the fact that it's, you know, it's not as fast. It's not about how many notes, it's just about how effective the composer has been with just, you know, more space and more, you know.
We were talking a little bit about, I had noticed that like there's this key change in the song. It's just kind of like, it's just sort of a simple like key change. It's just the same notes in a different key. But then like on the third, there's like a third key change. And when it's in that key, it sounds like it's hitting a note or two that are not really in the same, like they were kind of out of the key.
Yeah,
right.
Called non-diatonic. That's what that is. Yeah, non-diatonic. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Matt's the theory man.
And so that's
my official theory, man.
Essentially, it's called dissonance, which the word dissonant means unpleasant in music, and so I think that's what this composer was trying to create in that key change. Yeah, you know, in the key change, and then he went back to the original key, and then he repeated everything and did it again, and it sounded. You don't get tired of hearing it because of the way he does.
It adds that little unexpected thing that adds some weird tension to it.
Yeah,
made it even spookier than it was already a little bit.
That's true.
So, Chris, at some point, maybe you should introduce a Hiroyuki Masuno track to VGJam and see what you guys can pull from it. I think that would make for some really interesting influences there.
I like it.
Sure. That's a great idea. That's a great idea. Yeah.
Awesome.
Sounds
absolutely.
That could be fun. Matt, I think this is probably the last track you're going to be here for.
Yeah. I think that's it for me.
It was great having you on the show. So personally, outside of VGJam, do you have a website for your music that you create that people can check out before you leave?
Yes, it is Matthew E, as in Earl, Sargent, SARGENT.com. So MatthewESargent.com. My IMDb link is on the website on the front, and I also have audio and video reels on the front page, so you don't have to navigate, you don't have to work around, you know, trying to find what you want to listen to. I have about 17 tracks there and have a video reel as well.
That's pro stuff.
Awesome. Cool.
So, and credits are at the bottom.
We'll have links to that in the show notes. Matt, it was great having you on the show. Hopefully next time Chris is on, you can hang out for the whole show and we'll have some fun together as well. But thank you so much for coming by.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, so let's move on to our next track of the day. We're going to listen to, this one is a very interesting one. This is called Rap Battle Against Vlad the Impaler's Grandson from Gibbous, a Cthulhu adventure. This came out on PC and Mac just recently in 2019, composed by Liviu Bor and Cami Quibus.
I formally challenge you to battle, Vlad.
Yo, here's the thing I'm telling all contenders all the time. First of all, y'all gotta have a throne before you go for mine. You just need my cellar for replacement. Ever since back in the days when your mama kicked you out the basement.
Nice castle. Please excuse me if I'm laughing still. I've only seen more cobwebs on the shelf where you keep your rapping skills. Old and forgotten, much like your grandeur is. Ancestors on the wall so they can mock you over centuries.
Nah, centuries is how long I'll actually be laughing at just how wrong you look with that women's shirt that you got on. Yo, it's like I seen it in my crystal ball and can't forget it's evident. Your cat's the only that you'll ever get.
With the outfit, dude, eyesight playing tricks. Hell, your clothes are like booze and decisions. They don't mix well. Your looks all over the place. I call him like I see him. Let me just channel Indy. He belongs in a museum.
You could channel Mr. Jones till you ain't even close, and it shows. The only dope stuff you're saying are quotes. So now what's next? You're gonna try the two-headed monkey trick? Kid, I could just say grandfather's name and then they'll bow quick.
Doing battle with you, not with your family name. Your only claim to fame is who your grandpa was? Lame. Highborn don't make you high-skilled automatically. I don't give a fluffy cat's butt about your pedigree.
Yeah, it's not my fault you're weak, can't accept your defeat. Your name won't ring any bells, there's no buzz on the street. Return to the library where you can't belong. This ain't a game, nerd, you're better off reading the Necronomicon.
Low-born librarian, but check the skills I've gotten. I've dealt with black magic and cultists. This is nothing, it's like easy mode, not even trying, having fun. Kitty, cover up this fool with some litter, cause he's done. I can't stop rhyming. There's something wrong with me, I can't stop rhyming. Yo, my words are lethal, syntax too sick for your feeble comebacks. Give me any tracks to spit on, I'm sicker than fish with people. I'm even sicker than their vicar. Seen too much craziness, dark come to Transylvania. Man, it's all a hazy mess, I'm even harder to impress. There's cultists coming after me, compared to what I've been through. This rap battle's been a laugh to me. Ever read the Necronomicon? Please get back to me. Now I got a crazy cat that's talking smack to me. Sound like fun? Nah, it's one of those raw deals, like it feels like a superpower, but it only works when she feels like it. I'm going nuts, that's what's cracking. Hey, this talk of crazy huge monsters in the Kraken Bay. Who knows what's next? One problem at a time, that's how I'm at it. I'm turning alcoholics into caffeine addicts, getting bombed by cultists, dodging their dark lords, dreading esoteric orders, hating tourist boards. I'm never bored, never a dull moment since this started. When your cat freaking remembers every single time you farted, I just roll with it. There's stuff that I don't get, kind of amazing. How do I carry so much crap without a backpack, man? It's crazy. I stop and stare at everything, not even blinking, then rubbing everything on everything. What am I thinking? Whether in Darkham, Fishmouth, or Romania, just stop and talk to random people, it's a mania. The crap I have to pull just to get some answers, like dividing hearts, counting pieces for some crazy passwords. If it ain't one thing, then it's another. Like drinking vegetable oil and firewater? This world is crazy, surreal, freaking foul and dark. Solomonades, masks, and cats that growl and bark. Anyway, I'm out of here. Gotta find my cat a remedy. Peace, I'm on my way to more insanity. Cat? Let's dig deeper into the bowels of the castle and find peace.
Roger that. I'll scout ahead.
All right, we're back. That was Rap Battle against Vlad the Impaler's grandson from Gibbous, a Cthulhu. I can hardly say that without cracking a smile.
It's so good.
It's from Gibbous, a Cthulhu adventure. Came out on the PC and Mac in 2019, composed by Liviu Bor and Cami Quibus. I think it's pronounced Quibus. Cuibus. The names are interesting because the game is actually one of the first games ever developed in Transylvania.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Legit.
So, yeah, very Eastern European. And those accents are not put on; they are real. This is a cool game. It was a Kickstarter, and it was successfully funded. And the whole concept behind it was that it was a throwback to the original LucasArts style games, the Ron Gilbert, Paul Schaefer games. And, they wanted to they had this great idea for a concept and they wanted to create a game about it. They had some art assets and it looked really good. And so it was funded and it came out and it's gotten kind of mixed reviews. There's a lot of people out there that really enjoy it. And there's a lot of people out there who weren't as impressed as, I guess, the original Kickstarter trailer let on.
Those are the people who like Sierra games.
Yeah, exactly. But it's good. It's well done. The art is fantastic. It's very unique, very kind of dark, but very warm at the same time. It's got some great colors. And the writing is funny. It's not like LucasArts funny, but it's well done. But there's stuff like this where there's a lot of throwbacks and Easter eggs to a lot of the old LucasArts stuff. So this is kind of a play on the insult duel during the Secret of Monkey Island games, where you basically need to get enough experience or, read the right books or whatever to be able to rap battle with this guy who is the modern great-grandson or whatever of the actual Vlad the Impaler, because the game takes place in Transylvania as well. So,
makes sense. So
this is a guy that looks... So we were watching the video. Basically, this is the YouTube audio rip from the video, because you can't just get this soundtrack on a CD or hear this rap. You have to actually play the game to do it. So what were your thoughts on it?
It looked like it was coming, the rap phrases were being triggered by your audio choices.
Yeah.
From the way that video is playing. And there's kind of a little hitch in the music, and I think it's there so that it's waiting to sync up with your choice, which is kind of cool. I really think it's awesome when music is so integrally tied to the action in a game. I think that's super cool. That song is so funny. The first time when in the very beginning when he's like, "Nice castle," I can't not laugh at that. Nice castle. It's so sarcastic. I don't know. There's just something about it that just the delivery of it's so good. Yeah, that looks really funny. The lines in the rap about why am I looking at everything and why am I rubbing everything together is totally self-referential.
Talking to everybody that you see for no particular reason.
Yeah, talk to everybody. It's such a point and click adventure game sort of trope thing. It's really funny that it's poking fun at that stuff. Because that is what kind of Ron Gilbert was doing in Secret of Monkey Island when he made that game. It was, a parody sort of the genre stuff he was doing, but also it was this sort of parody of, adventure games in general. He had, before he made that game, wrote this huge, I guess, sort of famous article about adventure games that I think was called Why Adventure Games Suck or something like that, where he's basically saying these games in the past that we've made and that some other companies have made punish the player, are totally hostile to the player, and it makes the game not fun and stuff. But so anyway, Monkey Island is kind of there are several points in that game that are kind of directly tongue-in-cheek, winking at you when certain things happen.
Oh yeah, Guybrush would break the fourth wall constantly.
Yeah.
Every time you wanted to use an item that was just obviously not the right item for, Guybrush would be what are you doing? Come on, let's think about this a little bit better. And he would talk directly to the player, instead of just an info bubble saying, not compatible or not the right item. So it really made the player feel like they were actually existing in that world. And I think a lot of the games that came after that took after that fact. And it really does help the audience feel like, you know, they're really helping this character through the game instead of just kind of passively controlling somebody. So they had a really good concept going on with that.
That is true. Next, we've got Machinarium, the track Mr. Handigoat from Machinarium on the PC, Mac, console, mobile in 2009, composed by Tomas Dvorak. That was Mr. Handigoat from Machinarium on the PC, Mac, consoles, mobile in 2009, composed by Tomas Dvorak. I really love the soundtrack to this game, and I love the game too. It's beautiful. It's just super artfully done all around. The soundtrack is so texturally rich and just sonically interesting and complex sounding that I feel like it accompanies like the visuals of that game perfectly. It's, you know, you're this little robot, this little mechanical dude in this kind of robot world. A lot of it's sort of trashy junk looking stuff, but like there's all this, I don't know, clutter and texture visually. It's just they fit together so well in my mind. And the music just adds this huge amount of atmosphere to all of the neat art and the emotion of the story. It's a very cool little indie game. I feel like 2009 was like a big year for indie game soundtracks for me, like, because this is like around the same time I was listening to Fez and this and Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery EP.
Yeah. It's kind of where like the whole indie scene started to really take off too.
Yeah.
I think internet speeds were getting faster. People were able to download these games, more quickly. And just, the platforms for developers to be able to make small games and share them with the whole world very easily. Steam was building up around 2009,
Yeah.
very, very big. So I think that's why a lot of these soundtracks really started coming out around then, because they were attached to these games that otherwise wouldn't have been developed or released as widely.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that and Xbox Live Arcade, like Super Meat Boy. That was another one that was kind of big around the same time in my mind. Yeah, a lot of cool. It was just like this amazing. It was kind of an amazing time because like finally we've got some stuff that is a little more homegrown and artistic, and the creator's vision versus like these huge, multi-million-dollar productions.
AAA stuff. Yeah.
So yeah, and I think this is kind of like a beautiful example of like the kind of stuff that can come out of that kind of thing. So I love this game.
I do too. So it's funny. I featured this game on the Dark Sci-Fi episode that I did with Emily.
Mm-hmm.
God, must have been almost a year ago now. And at that point, I would listen to the soundtrack, and I really enjoyed it. And I was like, well, I gotta at least play a little bit of the game so I could talk about it. And I got to like maybe the third puzzle, got completely stuck, had no idea what to do. So I kind of like stopped there. And at that point, I had to record the show, so we didn't have much information to go on.
Yeah.
So when you picked another track from it, actually you picked the same track that I had picked originally, the Nanobot rap.
Yeah.
Which is a fantastic tune. And so we talked about it, and I was like, just choose another one, because the whole soundtrack is amazing. I'm sure people will love anything you choose. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to go back and I'm going to try to do this. And Logan was a little bit older, so I was like, come sit down with me. It's little cute robots. Like, you're going to love this game. Mm-hmm. And got to the point, we just started fresh and got to the point where it was like the same puzzle that I was stuck on. And the little son of a gun's like, oh yeah, you just do this. You have to cross these wires and it makes this polarity. And I learned all this from snap circuits. And I was like, you are kidding me.
Oh my God.
Solve the puzzle. We move on. And so we worked together for the rest of the game to like get through the entire game together. And we had a blast. It was a great little bonding moment. But, I just got to experience the whole game and how beautiful it is. It's all hand-drawn. It was all developed in Flash, which, like, blew me away. And there's all this really disparate and interesting music. And like you said, I think it fits the visual aesthetic so well because, like, especially in this track, it feels like there's little junk pieces of music thrown in that make the song enhanced. Whereas in the game, the visuals are like these little pieces of junk just kind of representing things that exist in our real life. Yeah. And it just makes everything so much more creative and beautiful. So I think the music and the visuals go hand in hand in this game so well.
Yeah, that made me think about the kind of lead instrument and how it is sort of this analog sounding thing. But there's also there's these weird little clicks and buzzes and stuff that are going along around it at the same time. It's really kind of interesting. The robots are these they're little mechanical things, but there's something about them that is very not artificial.
Very junky.
Yeah. They're kind of organic as a robot would be, you might not expect a robot to be.
Yeah.
But anyway, super great, well-made thing. Love it. I'm going to go back and play it again sometime soon. It's been a while.
Yeah, the development company that made it, Amanita Design, they're actually in the Czech Republic, so we're sticking with the Eastern European games, which is funny. But they've also done stuff like Samarost and Shuchel, and a couple of other really fun puzzle games that are out there, all developed in Flash, which is neat. I don't know what they've moved to now that Flash isn't really a viable platform anymore, but they've made some really, really interesting games with some really cool soundtracks. So
you could probably do that stuff in Unity these days, I bet. A handful of those games, Samarost, I think there's 3 of those, and Tomas Dvorak does all the soundtracks for those games too.
Yeah, exactly. So they work closely together.
He's great. I really love his stuff. Super good.
Yeah. So Machinarium is a game to look out for. I don't know, you can get it super cheap on Steam, and I think it's on a couple of different systems too. I think it might even be on Switch at this point. So put it on your wish list, pick it up when it's cheap. It takes, I don't know, I got through it in, I want to say 3 or 4 hours, but it was an amazing 3 to 4 hours. And it's like you said, it's a game that you want to play through again, because even if you know how to solve the puzzles, it's animated so well. And there are these little like thought bubbles, like if you leave the robots idle for a little bit, they have these thought bubbles that like fill in parts of the story, like they'll imagine like parts of their backstory and stuff, and like these little like hand-drawn black and white animations, and it's all fits so nicely together.
Yeah.
And even for kids that can't read, everything's visual. There's no dialogue, there's no text. It's really easy to kind of understand, or for an adult to say, look, those are the bad guys. They're bullying these robots, and now our little robot friend has to go help them out. And it's like, it's just something that everybody can kind of understand.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Like it doesn't have to like hammer over your head like what is going on, and it communicates it so well with the art and the music and just kind of the actions of what's going on screen. Another little thing I just remembered about that game is the hint guide.
Oh, yeah.
There's this little book you can click on in the corner. It has like the lock on the front. You have to play this little like space shooter game to get through, where you're flying a little key. And when you get through it, the hints themselves are basically like a really kind of like rudimentary drawing in comic form of the thing you have to do. So like even if you get the hint, you kind of have to decipher what the hint is, which I thought was brilliant.
Yeah, and it's all hand drawn, and it's really well done, almost like they storyboarded the game and then used those as the hints for the game. So it was really, really cool. And I remember Logan trying to play that shooter to get a hint, and he's just like, he has no experience with those kinds of games. And he's like, Dad, can you do this? And so I'm just like blasting through the, like, because shmups are shmups.
Yeah.
And he's just looking at me like, Dad, I can't believe you just did that. So like, well, I can come in handy I'll do the shooter parts and you can solve the puzzles. And
teamwork.
That's kind of how it went for the rest of the game. Yeah. Exactly.
Nice.
All right, ready to move on to our next one?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so a little bit of a different direction, and another kind of a newer game. This one is Stardust Hybrid Night from 2064 Read-Only Memories. This came out on Linux, Mac, Ouya, PS4, PS Vita, Windows, and Xbox One, starting in 2015, composed by Too Mellow, aka Matthew Hopkins. All right, that was Stardust Hybrid Night from 2064 Read-Only Memories on Linux, Mac, Ouya, PS4, PS Vita, Windows, and Xbox One, starting in 2015, composed by Too Mellow, aka Matthew Hopkins. If the name Too Mellow sounds familiar, it's because he has been a guest on Rhythm and Pixels before, where they played a episode full of nice, chill, kind of cyberpunky or vaporwave-ish tracks, and so that's kind of why I picked this, because he composed it. It's very much in that style. It reminded me of that episode that he was on. I do like this. It's very... The game itself has a lot of voice dialogue. I think nearly all of the dialogue in the game is voiced, so the music is not necessarily that much in your face. So there's a lot of kind of rhythm and groove in these tracks. And then I think this song really shines during those little parts where that solo comes in, and that little lead synth is just so soulful and feels really, really nice. What'd you think of this one, Chris?
Yeah. The solo part was great. Like I totally, that little organ solo thing that comes in definitely adds a whole lot of like soul to that track. You know, it's Too Mellow made a very mellow tune with the, you know, that funky bass and the hip hop kind of vibe thing, and there's this little kind of like melodic echoey notes in the background. I totally dig that. This is a game that I've been meaning to play and haven't gotten to yet, but I already own it, so I need to make the time and give it a shot. I've been hearing good stuff about it.
Yeah, I think our pal Dan Lawton actually recommended this to me when I mentioned that you and I were doing this episode, and so I didn't have it, but I went out and I bought it based on his recommendation, and I was not disappointed at all. Like I said, all of the dialogue is fully voiced, and the voice acting is just amazing. I think that's what really makes or breaks a game for me, especially with, you know, I talked about that a lot when I did the Oxenfree show.
Yeah.
So it's set up, it feels kind of like Snatcher, where you've got, you know, a segment of the screen is the people that you're talking to, or actually it's more like the environment that you're in, and then you'll see a closer up picture of the person that you're talking to on the left hand side, and then some minor commands down underneath them, and then below the environment screen you'll have, you know, a printout of the dialogue that's being said, and then options for how you want to respond to what people have said. So it's a very simple kind of setup game, very much like Snatcher. It's pixel art with very big pixels, so kind of a lower resolution, but lots of, you know, pinks and sky blues and grays and a very kind of vaporwave color palette aesthetic.
Cool.
The whole game takes place in a world where robots are assistants to humans and hybrids. So the song makes reference to hybrids, and so genetic hybrids are a thing now, and people can become part fox or part cat or part animal, and so there's this kind of revolution rising up where people are saying, you know, you're diluting the human gene pool, we're not going to be human beings anymore. So there's this kind of like this human liberation front going on where they want people to stop being genetically modified and they want to be pure humans. It's kind of an allegory for stuff that's going on in the world today, of course. But there's also these robots that and artificial intelligence is starting to kind of be more and more present. And at this point, robots are not sentient or self-aware, but they can mimic it really, really well. So people will have these kind of friends that are robots. But you are, in the middle of the night, you are visited by this robot named Turing, who claims to be the very first sapient robot developed by a friend of yours from way back in the day. And this friend has gone missing, and he fears that these corporations have found out that he's developed true AI, and so it's kind of like this kidnapping mystery, and you have to talk to people, and you have friends on the police force. You're a reporter yourself, that's your job, so you know how to go around and take notes and find clues, and so basically the whole game is figuring out why this person was kidnapped with this robot Turing as your kind of companion throughout the whole game. And Turing's voice actor, I don't know who it is, but it's just this perfect kind of almost childlike voice, but it's robotic, but also very emotive at the same time. Like it fits the characterization perfectly. Like it feels artificial, but sounds human. I don't know how they got it so perfect, but I just love listening to Turing talk throughout the entire game. It's an absolute joy. And plus, you know, you've got all these other character voice actors who are like, you know, the really cute, like club-going person with cat ears, or like the really gruff kind of police officer and stuff. And everyone is characterized so well. So I really recommend playing this game, Chris. I think you'll enjoy it. I was drawn in from like the first 5 minutes.
I'm intrigued. Yeah, it sounds very cool. I'm definitely going to check it out soon.
As far as the like the point-and-click adventure game stuff goes, you are pointing and clicking on things in the environment to see them. You don't have too much in the way of inventory. I think you've got like 5 inventory slots, and I'm about 2 or 3 hours into the game, and I don't think I've filled more than 1 or 2 of those slots at a time. So it's kind of, there's not a lot of focus on really that kind of puzzle solving. It's more like picking up visual and audio clues from people that you're talking to and kind of using that to figure out where to go next and such. So it's a great adventure. It's like an interactive visual novel, I think, more than kind of a point-and-click adventure. But I really wanted to share it because it felt like it really belonged in the show.
I can get down with that for sure. Cool.
So what you got coming up next?
Let's see here. The next thing I've got on the list is from the game The Dig. That would be the track Another World. This is on the PC, Mac, in 1995, and this is composed by Michael Zealand as well.
Oh, who you might remember from Secret of Monkey Island.
Yes.
Cool. Be right back.
That was Another World from The Dig on PC and Mac in 1995, composed by Michael Zealand, the same composer as Secret of Monkey Island, and he was doing a very different thing here.
Yeah, man, this feels way more grand and movie-esque. You know, you could definitely tell Monkey Island was a video game track, and this belongs, you know, like an E.T. or something like that.
Yeah, that's Steven Spielberg's influence, I'm gonna guess, whose name was on the box of this game because it was, I think, originally going to be a movie or TV show. I think it went through a few different revisions before he was just like, let's just do this as a game at LucasArts.
Interesting.
And I think he just kind of worked initially with the creators of the game. I'm not sure he was through the whole process, but I think he kind of co-wrote the story to it. But it is definitely a more cinematic style game. It's more serious in tone than kind of other funny point and click stuff that Lucas did. It's really a cool game. My eye was caught by the very shiny box on the shelf at the where did I buy this? I think it was at like Barnes & Noble when they had a PC software section a long time ago. Yeah, so this caught my eye. I finally, I remember seeing it several times before I actually picked it up. And when I finally did, I was very happy I did, because it is a very neat game. Starts out as the kind of asteroid coming to hit the Earth sort of story, and you're controlling the crew of 3 astronauts or so that are in the space shuttle going up to place explosives on the asteroid in order to blow it off course. And when you do that, you open up a cave into the asteroid, and it reveals it it is actually hollow on the inside, and you drift into it as just an astronaut in a spacesuit, and then it closes up and you zip off to some other galaxy somewhere.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and you find yourself on this alien world, this desolate alien world, where there's kind of the remnants of an alien race from the past that seems to be missing. Something has happened, and various things go on with your crew as you're exploring and are discovering things. It is super atmospheric, and it is a really cool looking game. They did a lot of really high quality kind of full motion video cutscene. Maybe not full motion. It is video, but I believe that ILM actually did the 3D scenes in between the actual gameplay scenes. So
and those digitized special effects and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And they spent a ton of money on this game, and I think that it overall was kind of disappointing for Lucasfilm.
Yeah.
But who cares what they think? I think it's a really good game, and if you like point and click adventure games, it's definitely one that you should try.
That's cool. I mean, I've heard this name over and over again as being a quality title, but I've never... A, I didn't know much about it, and B, the name of the game just never really seemed to catch my attention like The Dig. It just sounds very generic, so I don't think I looked into it enough to really... take an interest in it, but just that kind of teaser plot that you threw out there sounds really, really cool. So now I wanna check this one out.
It's neat. I do remember there being a few puzzles in there that will stump you. It's kind of if you're gonna get into a point and click adventure.
That's what the web is for.
Yeah, that's what the web is for. Find this. If you get hung up, just find a hint. You can move on in the story. It's I guess that's the thing about these games, is that they will throw these wrenches at you, but all you have to know is the solution to the puzzle to move forward. So
yeah, and sometimes the story is just worth experiencing for it without the puzzles itself. So
absolutely.
How's the soundtrack? Is the rest of the music very cinematic like this?
It is. It's a lot like this. It's a lot of spacious sounding symphonic kind of stuff. It just lends a lot to the atmosphere. There are points in the game where it picks up, becomes more melodic, but generally it's this kind of mysterious, grand sort of thing. Also sounds kind of almost dirgy or something. There's a kind of a darkness to parts of it. But yeah, it's very interesting. I was reading also that they actually put this out on a CD. It had a actual soundtrack release to go along with the game.
Oh, cool.
And I think there was a book too, that they put a lot of money behind trying to boost this up into being a huge thing, and just didn't catch many people's attention, I don't think, but the quality is there. So maybe we can all appreciate it later on. Yeah,
it seems like it was a little bit ahead of its time. I think maybe if it got released a little bit later, when Myst became popular, this probably would have fit in with that kind of aesthetic. Once people got into that kind of a game, it feels like a point and click adventure, but it feels like it would appeal to the people that really liked Myst and all of this the Cyan and Sierra games and stuff like that. Yeah, from that era.
Yeah, I could see that.
Cool. All right. Well, ready for something a little more video gamey in terms of music sound?
Yeah, I'm down for that.
All right, cool. So let's listen to the ad-lib version of the track The Prophecy from the game Ween, The Prophecy. This came out on DOS in 1992, composed by Charles Calais.
Exciting.
All right, that was the ad-lib version of The Prophecy from the game Ween the Prophecy, which was also released just under the name The Prophecy in some regions. That was released on PC in 1992 for DOS, composed by Charles Calais. And I feel like, we needed some FM in here. The ad-lib card was well and widely used among a lot of the point-and-click adventure games from the early 90s, so we needed some introduction there. I really like this one. I was just telling you, Chris, as we were listening to it, because the B section sounds a lot like the B section to the theme song for Doctor Who. You've got those arpeggios going in the foreground, and then that kind of like really dun 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 dun. That really felt like that stuff, but done in FM. So I immediately recognized that as being from very, very highly influenced from that show. Being a big fan of it. So
I didn't catch that until you said it, and then I was like, oh my gosh, yes, totally, like da da da, like that sounds Doctor Who to me.
Yeah, for sure. So this game is probably the worst example of point-and-click adventures that we're going to feature on the show. This game got really terrible reviews, and a lot of that is because the presentation is actually really good. So the introduction, which is where this song plays, it's a DOS-based, floppy disk-based game. It just came in a couple of floppies that you would load into your computer, but it had almost full-motion video sequences. So there would be digitized pictures of people that would animate very low color, so they would all be red scale or blue scale or something, depending on the environment, but the graphics were pretty good. They were pretty clear, pretty easy to tell what was going on. Once you got into the game, though, it was really kind of difficult. You couldn't die, but the puzzles were just not logical at all. You would need to use you would have a pot that you would think that you would be making food, because there were hearths all around you with flames, and you can make make potions and stuff. But then one of the puzzles was you needed to cut the handle off the pot to use it as a lever to open up a door. It was just things that you would not exactly, stuff that you would never think to combine together. And you had this friend that was a bat that would only show up when you had strawberries, and you would have to feed the bat strawberries. And it would just randomly drop an item that you need, completely arbitrarily just drop an item that you need. So it was the puzzles were just kind of shoehorned in. Yeah. Whoever was developing this game just didn't really have a good grasp on how these games work. So I also kind of felt it was important to showcase a game that kind of is what not to do when you're doing a game series like this, because we've been talking about so many good versions and what makes these games great, but it's very easy to kind of screw up a point-and-click adventure game, and a lot of that is by making the game defy gameplay logic and the rules of these games. And so having these puzzles that just don't make any logical sense is a great way to get a player just completely stuck, especially when you've got an inventory full of things and you're just looking for this right combination of weird stuff to put together to make an item that's kind of unrelated to the two items you just put together. So, music is cool. The developer themselves, actually, they're called Cocktail Games. They are from France, and they've released a whole bunch of different point-and-click games. Their most popular series is called Goblins, and there's 3 of them. And the first one was called Goblins, the second one was called Goblins, but there was 2 eyes in the second syllable, and the third one was Goblins with 3 eyes, which is kind of clever. But they were a lot more humor-oriented, and they felt more like you're playing a cartoon, kind of like, the LucasArts games. So at that point, they kind of got an actual feel of how to do point-and-click adventures. But this was kind of during their learning curve where they didn't really have a good handle on it. So
I think there was a real Wild West sort of period for these kind of games where everybody was just kind of trying to throw stuff at the wall and see what stuck, and figuring out what is the most fun maybe wasn't in the forefront of everyone's mind early on. They were just trying to give you some kind of experience. I don't know. I'm not quite sure what their thinking was behind some of those, but it sounds interesting. There's definitely some weird stuff you can find if you dig in these old point and clicks.
Yeah, for sure. I was just looking at the Wikipedia article on it, and it says Adventure Gamers gave it a 40%, commenting that for players who don't particularly enjoy inventory puzzles, the game easily becomes, quote, obscure, tedious, and, well, plain unenjoyable. So
harsh. But probably
this is
true.
probably the only game of the show that both of us are not going to recommend you seek out. But the music is definitely pretty good. Charles Calais was the kind of in-house composer for Cocktail Games, so all of the games that they released, he wrote the soundtracks for, and those are definitely enjoyable. He's got a good handle on how to use the ad-lib card. So
yeah, I definitely liked the sound of it. I mean, I have a lot of nostalgia for that type of old PC game music. I've probably played a lot of stuff on my old, I guess it was probably on my Sound Blaster. I don't know, was Adlib? What was Adlib?
Adlib was actually FM based.
Okay.
But
yeah,
it used more like MIDI instructions to create the music.
Oh,
so it was kind of like it could do like half sine waves and half sawtooths. It had a very interesting set of tones that it could use that most other FM cards, like in the Genesis or the PC 98, it gave it a very unique sound among most of the other FM stuff out there. So that's why the music on the Adlib always sounded you can always kind of like tell when something was Adlib versus the Yamaha stuff. Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I have nostalgia for that sound. I guess I just didn't know how to verbalize exactly what it was, but like those old PC games, like I know that a lot of them did that ad-lib thing. So, yeah.
It's very almost like simplified FM with kind of a certain characteristic to it. So,
yeah. Yep.
All right. Well, let's get on to something a little more modern. What you got coming up next?
I have Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery. This is the track Lone Star, and that's on PC, mobile, Switch. I feel like it probably came out in some other places too. I think it ended up getting ported everywhere, but that was in 2011, and it was composed by Jim Guthrie. That was Lone Star from Super Brothers Sword and Sorcery EP from the PC, mobile, and Switch in 2011, composed by Jim Guthrie. That is an interesting game with a very interesting soundtrack. I don't know, it's so weird, like how the aesthetic of that game and the aesthetic of the music and the person that is creating the music for that game all have this like very indie vibe to it.
Oh,
like,
yeah, for sure.
It's like Jim Guthrie is this kind of like folk music guy, but also does some weird stuff like, you know, create an album with a piece of music making software on the PS1. Like he's done all kinds of weird stuff, but like the whole...
He's like equal parts hippie and nerd.
Yeah, exactly. It's great. And that game sort of feels like it's, you know, it feels like that. It's made by people like that.
Yeah,
like,
yeah, for sure.
It's this really kind of laid back sort of point and click, wander around, talk to a handful of people, explore like a little area.
Unleash evil.
There's like this whole, I don't know, I know that like the folks who are writing that game were all influenced by some philosophy book they were reading or something. I read a wiki one time and I was like, I don't know what any of this means, but I liked playing this game.
Yeah.
And like it's full of like interesting atmosphere and mood and style. Like the pixel art style in that game is unique and super interesting, and like a way to do pixel art that makes pixel art like designed with pixel art, because pixel art is the best way to make it look the way that the style needs to look, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, it was an interesting game. Like I think I remember that coming out as one of like the first popular iPhone games that you could buy.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I got it. I got it on my iPad only because originally it was like one of the first like real video games you could get for like a mobile device. You know, like there's all the puzzle games with all the microtransactions and stuff, but this just felt like a real kind of console or PC game experience that you could get on a mobile device. So I was really interested in trying it, and I played it and I really enjoyed it. And I think I had the iPad 2 at that point. It was like, you know, one of the earliest devices out there. So listening to the music on a tiny little speaker, even then it sounded good.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to try to see if I could find the actual music on something that wasn't going to sound like I was listening to it at the end of a tin can with a string attached to it. So I found Jim Guthrie's Bandcamp and the Super Brothers EP soundtrack that he wrote, and fell in love with it and just bought it right then and there. Yeah. And especially this track just is so good. Just that bass groove with that kind of like almost like watchmakers like storefront kind of beat in the background is so.
It's like a robot playing the spoons or something.
Yeah, totally.
And that particular like little like staccato thing that just played in my head. Like after I turned the game off, it would just keep popping up, and I would keep thinking about it. Yeah, it's a neat one.
It's funny how much we were when we were talking about Machinarium and that soundtrack, how much that song reminds me of this song, and I wanted to bring it up, but I was like, I'm going to wait until listeners hear both tracks so they can kind of compare. They both have that kind of weird mechanical stuff going on in the background. They both have very kind of whimsical lead instruments kind of in the high range, and they both have these very like deep bassy grooves. It's really interesting how many similarities these two tracks have. And they sound different enough that you can tell they were composed by different people for different purposes, but on paper, they both feel very, very similar to each other.
Yeah, and it is interesting because they both are like, my observation was that like the art and the music and the story are also intertwined in this really interesting way that feels like this cohesive whole, you know? They both really have that thing going on. Yeah, it's an interesting little game that I feel like I need to go back to again one day.
Yeah, I was lamenting that I hadn't finished the game myself, so now that I'm talking about it, it's making me reminiscent of it. Now I need to go back and and play it again. So maybe this time
it's not super long.
Yeah, no, I figured as much. And plus, you know, I've listened to the soundtrack so much now that I've got like every single song memorized. I think it'll kind of like help me as I'm listening to the game as I play it. It'll feel more familiar to me. So that'll be interesting to enjoy as well. So pretty cool. All right, man, ready for our next one?
Yeah, let's hear what we got next.
What do we got coming up? Oh, this one I picked just for you. I think you'll enjoy this one. This one is called In the Depths of Hell, from Hell, a Cyberpunk Thriller. This came out on DOS, 3DO, and Mac in 1994. I had it on the 3DO.
Whoa.
Composed by the Heavy Skies, comprised of Michael Bross, who was vocals, keyboard, drum, and synthesizer, also the composer of the rest of the soundtrack to the game. Stephen Burkholder on guitar and backing vocals, Jeff Stringer on the noise guitar track, and Stacy Dillon credited for moans and sighs. Let's get into some true 90s electro-industrial. We'll be right back.
All right.
All right, take off those fishnet shirts. Scratch the eyeliner off of your face. That was In the Depths of Hell, From Hell, a cyberpunk thriller that came out on DOS, 3DO, and Mac in 1994, composed by the Heavy Skies, led by Michael Bross, who was also the composer of the soundtrack. And I don't think I need to go into the other band members. They've embarrassed themselves enough. So I'm kidding. I mean, I really actually, when I first heard this track, I really liked it. I mean, I was super into early mid-90s industrial music at the time, and this is more or less like a perfect mirror image of like an amalgamation of lots of different Nine Inch Nails songs all in one, with a little bit of like maybe Sister Machine Gun and KMFDM thrown in for good measure. But it was really cool to see it in a video game, like in a piece of mainstream media where, you know, at the time the music I was listening to was so kind of niche and not really being enjoyed by lots of people that I knew.
Yes.
So to have it in this game, which was also kind of like this dystopian cyberpunk point and click adventure, it was like this perfect kind of storm of lots of different themes that I enjoyed. So
sounds very cool to me.
Yeah. And so first of all, what did you think of the music itself?
I liked it. It's definitely like pulling from early Nine Inch Nails, like Pretty Hate Machine, Broken Arrow, Nine Inch Nails. It sounds like it could have been on the soundtrack for the movie The Crow. Like,
oh, for sure, 100%.
It's so much that sound and that vibe at the time, like, which I loved a lot of that stuff, and I still do. But it's very much.
No lie, I still pull out the Crow soundtrack every once in a while and give it a listen. So I can't deny that there.
It's a good one.
Yeah, so the game itself, I got it for the 3DO, and the reason I got it was because I was a really big fan of Dennis Hopper. I think Speed had just came out, and he was like the main bad guy in Speed, and he was just, such like this cool bad guy, and I just really enjoyed his work in that movie. So I noticed that he was the main antagonist in this game, as well as like Grace Jones was in it, Stephanie Seymour. So it had some big name actors for the time.
Whoa, okay.
Lending their voice talents and then doing a couple of full motion video scenes as well.
Gotcha.
So I was like, all right, I'll pick it up. Like I was looking for new 3DO software and brought it home, and I was kind of pleased by it. It's got this weird. It takes place in the future, and you play as a couple of agents who are a married couple. America's kind of been taken over by this fascist theocracy, and the world itself.
Too real.
Yeah. But the world itself, like the gates to heaven and hell are open. So it's like Earth kind of shares living space with angels and demons. And so everybody kind of gets along together, but there are some murders have taken place, and it seems like there's supposed to be this peace treaty between demons and humans, and there isn't supposed to be any sort of antagonism between everybody. But it seems like a demon has murdered a human, and so this couple starts investigating it, but then their house is infiltrated by other humans, like from their own agency. In the middle of the night, they try to kill them. So like they feel like they're getting too close to something that's like a cover up. So they're very similar to like the previous games that we've talked about, like 2064. They're trying to solve this mystery and clear their own name, and so they have to talk to denizens of hell and heaven and everybody in between to try to get to the bottom of the mystery. So it was fun. It was a good game. Graphics were all low res digitized CG.
I haven't seen it, but it's exactly what I was picturing.
Yeah, everything's kind of just brown and green, like it looked like the colors that are in like Quake.
Yeah.
Every mature game at the time was olive green and brown for some reason. So you get a lot of that in this game. But everything was voice acted, and everything was pretty well done. A couple of the puzzles were a little clunky. Some of the voice acting was a little off. But for its time, I think it was a really forward-reaching game, and it was doing a lot of things that other games weren't doing. And especially for like the 3DO, I don't think it really had any other games that were like this on this kind of adult, kind of like mature level without being just overtly like, sexual, like Plumbers Wear Ties or something like that. So, so it was cool. I didn't even know it was out on PC until very recently. Because this theme song was on the 3DO version, but was compressed to like 92 kilobits, really bad quality. And so when I discovered that there was a much higher quality version released on the PC soundtrack, I grabbed it immediately and was like, oh, going to share this on the show.
That's cool. I had never heard of this game before. I kind of have a blind spot for the 3DO, but yeah, this is one that's totally gone under my radar, and it has some kind of good industrial music in it, so
Yeah,
it's cool to hear about.
the rest of the music, it's all in-game, and it's all kind of sequenced music, so at least on the 3DO, didn't really have a native music sequencing sound chip, so I think they had to build one specifically for the 3DO, so it was really kind of stilted and didn't follow a discernible tempo.
Gotcha.
It was like so I think the PC version probably used MIDI or ad-lib or something like that, so probably sounded a little bit better, but it was very simple, kind of dark bass grooves and drum beats and stuff like that. So not much to speak of as far as the rest of the soundtrack goes, but it begins and ends with variations on this song, which I felt was really cool at the time.
Huh. That's interesting. I like it.
Yeah. I don't know if it's a game that it's worth checking out. It's probably worth watching some video on YouTube, like a playthrough, just to see what it's all about, because not everybody's got a 3DO. They're not exactly easy to come by nowadays. So but I still have my copy.
Yeah. Is there much to play on a 3DO?
There is some. I'm going to do a 3DO show eventually and disprove a lot of those theories, because I actually am a closet huge fan. I owned the system when it was new, like I just said, so I was kind of intimately familiar with a lot of the more quality titles, or stuff that people write off as bad, but maybe didn't spend as much time with. So who knows? This game might make a reappearance on that episode.
You'll have to educate me and the others that have not experienced the 3DO.
Yes, exactly. So what do we got coming up next?
Next, we have another LucasArts classic. We have Bernard's Theme from Maniac Mansion on the NES from 1990, composed by George Sanger.
Love this soundtrack.
Welcome back. You just heard Bernard's Theme from Maniac Mansion on the NES in 1990, composed by George Sanger. That was one of my first point-and-click games. I think it's probably the first one I ever played. I loved Maniac Mansion on the NES. The soundtrack to that was incredible. It was interesting because I know that the original version did not have the soundtrack that the NES game had. It just had a few pieces of music throughout the game and like the title screenshot. I think there was some music at the end, but aside from that, it was just you're walking around in silence. But the NES version, amazing, and I would rent this game. I went to a friend's house and watched him play through a large portion of it, and it was a lot of fun. It was cool because you could sort of like couch spectate that game and get a different experience from like your own playthrough, because you would pick like 3 out of 7 characters. I think it was 7 characters that would let you choose from in the beginning, and one was the protagonist main protagonist Dave, and then you would pick a couple of the other kids to go along with you. And depending on who you picked, the story would play out differently, slightly. It's like the way you would solve the puzzles would happen differently, and that could lead to a different ending of the game. And there were a few different ways you could finish it. It was very cool. Bernard's theme is awesome. It's super cool. It reminds me of Devo.
Yeah.
It's got this kind of disjointed, groovy sound going on. A super cool song. All the music in that game is good.
It's very nerd rock.
Nerd rock, yes. Yep. I could.
Yeah.
That sounds right. Yes.
Just to go back to what you said about like the Commodore 64 version, I think the NES version succeeded so well over that one because George Singer did a really good job at expressing every character's personality through their music. Like you felt like you knew like Razor, and you felt like you knew Michael just by the music that played, like when you selected their heads at the title screen. You know, like
for sure.
Razor was like this punk chick with this like big red hair, and like so like this like Ramones Misfits style song would start playing when you selected her, and you're like, all right, I know what she's all about. And then you went to Michael, and like this groovy kind of like Motown song would start playing, and you're like, all right, I know what he's all about. And so you would just switch to these different characters, and that's what I would do when I was a kid, because I used to own this game, and I would just pick the different characters and just listen to their music over and over again, probably more than I actually played the game. But just really enjoyed how much their personalities were expressed through the music.
That was great. It added so much to that game. I played that version first. I had a C64, and I had seen where, like, at the electronics store, the Commodore version was cheaper. And I could afford that, you know. I was like, oh, I'll get that. I love that game.
Yeah.
And I brought it home and was pretty disappointed that there wasn't much music to it.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that version was still pretty good. Actually, the C64 version is apparently, like, Ron Gilbert's, in his opinion, the definitive version, which doesn't have the music though, Ron.
Interesting. Yeah, and see, the music is what defines the game for me, so...
Yeah.
But I know that they did cut out some of the stuff from the Nintendo version because Nintendo was very, censorship insane with that stuff.
Yeah, there were a few things.
Putting the hamster in the microwave and all that stuff where they actually had it in the original print of the game, and then they had to go back and do a revision so that you couldn't microwave the hamster.
Yep. The version I played, you could microwave the hamster.
Yeah, me too.
It's one of the few ways you can get yourself killed in that game.
Yes, true. Yeah, really fun game. Like we said, I think at the beginning of the show, it was one of my first introductions to point-and-click games too, and I really had no other way to play these kind of games when I was a kid. So I felt that this game was kind of like by itself in its genre. You know, this is a new kind of game that had been invented. Just the amount of complexity was insane. Required a lot of reading, so, a kid, me, was not used to that, more used to the action stuff, so was using my brain a little bit more. And then B, different endings. What is this? You can get multiple endings for a game? I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, that was pretty new.
And then, different combinations of different characters helping you play the game differently, like who records a demo tape and then plays it for an alien, and who can develop pictures and give it to somebody who's looking for a picture of a certain, like, there were different ways to do, and the game experience would change drastically depending on who you picked, and it was just this whole kind of new, weird game. A game didn't have like a set A, B, C, D all the way to Z. You beat the game. This could go A to F to G to B to C. It was like, I couldn't comprehend it. And owning the game was great because it really helped me wrap my brain around this non-linear characteristic of this game and helped me appreciate games like that in the future. Whereas if I didn't get this game kind of randomly when I was a kid, I don't think I would have as much appreciation for point and clicks nowadays.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read some stuff by Ron Gilbert where he was talking about how this game was just, they didn't really know what they were doing when they were making it.
I can see that in places,
We're trying to put the pieces together and come up with something that would make a cohesive whole in the end. And it seems like it might have been a real headache to put together.
Yeah, it's definitely not as refined, and it definitely isn't a perfect game by any stretch, but I think it's not only ours, but I think so many other people's first kind of introduction to this genre that it really does hold a special place in a lot of people's hearts for lovers of point-and-click adventures, so...
Yeah, it's kind of the proto point-and-click.
Yeah.
The music in this game is, like, so distinctive, like, the kind of sounds that they could get out of the NES were different from other games on the Nintendo. Like, I feel like it was so distinct that, like, you could recognize this. It stands out amongst other stuff.
Yeah, for sure. I know, George Singer worked on this, and I played a track from Funhouse on VG Embassy before, which I, stated as like, you can definitely recognize this being from the same dude who wrote the Maniac Mansion soundtrack.
Yes.
And then Adventures of Rad Gravity, which is a more interesting soundtrack in that it feels like it wasn't implemented correctly. Like, a lot of people call the theme song to Rad Gravity like one of the worst NES songs ever made, which is weird because I feel like Maniac Mansion has some of the best NES music ever made. So
yeah,
it's really strange.
That's odd.
Yeah, something with like the implementation and how they coded the music for Rad Gravity's theme song just sounds like it wasn't put in correctly or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
But just really complex music. George Singer was, he wrote authentic American rock songs and for live performance. And I think his talents in that really translated well to making authentic sounding NES rock songs and not just digital emulations of rock songs like a lot of the other composers that were told to make rock songs kind of did. So, and it had this grittiness, this kind of unpolished, like raw garage rock feel.
It definitely
which
does.
is so weird to hear from like a digital only audio chip. He just really had a knack for that.
It's very organic and natural sounding.
Yeah.
It's
strange.
Despite the fact that the song we just listened to is very robotic, but there's something that seems like it's jamming,
Yeah, for sure.
It's cool. It's great. It's one of my favorite games.
Yeah. Worth checking out, and
really love it.
the sequel is also excellent as well. Not an NES game and not music by George Singer, but Day of the Tentacle really kind of follows up on the whole universe and how everything kind of shakes out after the original game does. So, anyways, let's move on to our last track of the day. We've got an interesting one. This is a first-person point-and-click adventure that actually has more in common with stuff like Duke Nukem than any other of the games we've talked about. This is Apartment from the game Normality. This came out for DOS in 1996, composed by Chris Adams, Neil Biggin, and Pat Phelan. Be right back. All right, that was Apartment from Normality. Came out on DOS in 1996. Composed by Chris Adams, Neil Biggin, and Patrick Phelan. Fun little jazz noir piece that seems to be kind of a common theme among a lot of the tracks that we've been playing today. I feel like this doesn't really get going until like 1:40 in, where all the instruments finally start kind of expressing themselves.
Yeah.
But it's a very slow burn, but it's a very groovy kind of slow burn. It's really cheesy, but the game is supposed to be kind of cheesy, so I feel like some of these like crescendos and decrescendos like in the middle of the song are kind of there for comedic effect, and it's not just like poor composition, you know what I mean?
It sounded intentional to me. Yeah.
Yeah. The game is it's a first-person 3D game, so like I said before, it's more akin to like Duke Nukem or Doom in the perspective and the control that you have over the character. But instead of shooting enemies and, finding keys to doors and stuff, you're walking around, you're talking to people, you're gathering items in inventory and combining them together and then using them in different buildings and stuff. So it's cool that it has this kind of point-and-click adventure aesthetic to it, but it has 3D environments that you can kind of wander around. So I'd say, I guess maybe like Fallout 3 without the combat kind of a thing, where like, if you're in a town, you're talking to real people and kind of like, getting your way through storylines in that respect. There's dialogue trees and such. But very ahead for its time. For like 1996, this was, I think, probably the first 3D point-and-click adventure game that I'm aware of, anyway.
Oh, that sounds pretty cool. I've never seen this. I've not heard of this game.
It's pretty obscure, and there were two different versions made. There was a version released in the United Kingdom by Gremlin Interactive, and then Interplay released it in North America. And they changed the location of the game based on where it was released. So the UK version, the game universe took place in England, and it took place in the US in the American release. And so they completely rewrote and re-recorded all of the dialogue with either, British accents or American accents and colloquialisms depending on each. So if you get both versions of this game, you can play it twice with kind of a very different feel.
That's interesting. That's like some micro localization. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to check out either one of those.
To make it even sweeter, the cherry on top is that the US game included Corey Feldman as the protagonist voice actor.
It's mouth.
Yep. So, really interesting stuff.
That's so funny.
It kind of takes place in this city of Neutropolis, which has kind of been taken over by this fascist regime. And so you've just gotten out of prison. Your twin brother has supposedly been killed by the regime. And so your dad is also like this ex-military, like very strict father figure, and so you've got to sneak out of your apartment. So this song takes place right at the beginning of the game in your apartment, where you're kind of gathering up stuff to kind of stealthily sneak out and try to join the resistance. So that's why there's kind of like a stealthy kind of noir feel to this. You're kind of like, gathering your stuff together. So you've got to visit like factories and junkyards and stuff where all of the individuals that are in this resistance movement are hanging out, and kind of gain the trust of them, do them favors, go on missions for them. So it's interesting. It's well written. It got pretty good reviews when it came out. It was just, I don't think it was marketed very well, and it's kind of ugly, so I don't think people really got that into it very much. Gotcha. But I think it holds up well as like a prototypical like Fallout style game.
Gotcha.
So modern gamers that are into the genre might appreciate it.
That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely had that the jazzy thing going on, the noir feeling. You said there was like kind of stealthy stuff going on. Like I definitely was thinking like, this sounds like you're sleuthing, you're trying to discover something, you're looking around or whatever.
You're kind of walking around the apartment looking for anything that might be related to your brother's death. And so, as you find things, it slowly becomes more and more apparent to you that the city's police force, known as the Norms, were responsible for your brother's death. So you want to join the resistance to kind of help overthrow the government and find out what actually happened to your brother. So
serious.
It's cool.
But yeah.
Serious but very tongue-in-cheek.
Yeah, that sounds interesting. Like the tone the tone that the music is describing, it sounds different than what I'm picturing from the story you're telling me, but it'd be interesting to see it.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever seen the movie Idiocracy, where everybody's just like this kind of amped up, stupid version of real people.
Gotcha.
This is kind of how it is.
Yeah.
People are just either just complete idiots or, they're whatever, like the 7 deadly sins. Like there's like representatives of somebody who just does nothing but eat, somebody who just does nothing but wants to stay in bed and doesn't get out, that kind of stuff. So everybody's a very kind of enhanced version of everybody's weaknesses and flaws.
Gotcha.
So
interesting. Yeah. The soundtrack really reminded me of like Mark Mothersbaugh stuff, like the Rugrats or something,
Oh yeah, for sure.
Super felt like that to me.
A different side of Devo.
Yes, to go back to Devo again. It also kind of reminded me of like the music from something like The Sims or something.
Yeah, I think so too. Patrick Phelan, Neil Biggin, they all worked for Gremlin as far back as like the Amiga and Commodore 64 days. So they've been working on that stuff forever and ever.
Makes sense.
So I think that pretty much wraps up our show. Chris, I had a blast with this.
Yeah.
I feel like there, again, like I said at the end of the last point-and-click adventure game that I did on Pixel Tunes, there's so many more point-and-click adventure games that we could have shown off. And I'm really curious, listeners, what your favorite games are and what favorite tracks from point-and-click adventure games you have. So definitely hit us up on social media.
Yeah, I'd like to find out what other people like. Pretty much everything you brought was new to me. I know that Sierra games are hugely underrepresented in this episode, but because I have not really played many. Actually, I don't think I've played through any Sierra games. So I want to hear more folks talk about that, and maybe we can revisit one day down the line after maybe I've played a Sierra game or two.
That would be a lot of fun. Yeah, we could both choose some Sierra games to play and just do an episode focused on them.
Interesting.
I would totally be down for that.
I'll be finding the wikis based on the things I've heard.
All right, so wrapping the show up, as far as VGJam goes, where can we find you guys on the web? How can we listen to your show?
You can go to VGJam.com, or you can find us on iTunes. I guess that's Apple Podcasts now, and RSS. I don't think we're on Spotify yet. We probably should get there because this is the year of being on Spotify. We're not there yet, but we'll get that one sorted. But yeah, look for us in the normal podcast places. The website, VGJam.com. We're definitely there. We'd love for you to subscribe and listen every once in a blue moon when we release something.
Yeah, totally worth it, especially to subscribe to VGJam, especially with shows that don't have kind of a weekly or a bi-weekly release schedule. That way, when a new VGJam comes out, if you're subscribed, you can immediately, you don't have to keep refreshing the page every week or so to see if something new has come out.
Subscribing is good. It's we love making the podcast together. It's definitely labor intensive though, and that's why it's kind of sporadic. But take a listen if you haven't heard it yet. We'd love for you to check it out.
Very cool.
Aside from that, I am planning to do some Twitch streaming, and I would like to revisit some of these old point-and-click games and some of the new games that I haven't played. And join me for that. Twitch.com/Steen3D, STEEN, number 3, letter D. I think I'm gonna maybe post up and sort of share around some definitive dates that I will start doing some specific game streaming. So look for that stuff. You can find me in the VG Embassy Discord too, and some of those other Discords with VG music.
Absolutely, we're always hanging out at the VG Embassy Discord. It's like the place to be.
Faux show.
If you like VGM. Speaking of which, a little bit of self-promotion for my stuff. So this show is going to be released January 3rd, 2020. The next week, so the week of January 6th, a brand new podcast I'm doing will be releasing its first episode. So Justin Schneider from XVGM Radio and I are doing a brand new podcast, kind of in the VGM podcast format, but featuring music from the industrial and goth and dark wave and EBM genres from all years, 80s to present day. We just recorded our first episode. We had a blast, a lot of really good music. So you can check that show out at arcanemachine.net. The show is going to be called The Arcane Machine. We're going to have a Discord. We're going to have a Twitter, all that stuff. So keep an eye open for that on the VG Embassy Facebook page and on Discord. I will be posting links to the new show when it drops. Even if you're not into that genre of music, the show's going to kind of serve as an introduction to it. We're going to kind of ease you in before we get into the really nitty-gritty, hard to listen to industrial stuff. But there's a lot of stuff in this subgenre that's a lot of really good listenable music that I think fans of video game music will enjoy. So I know, Chris, you're a fan of industrial music and stuff. So hopefully maybe you want to be on the show with us someday. That would be awesome.
That would be awesome. I would look forward to doing that. Yeah, for sure. I'm looking forward to checking out this show when it comes out. Will it have anything from In the Depths of Hell on it? Hell, a cyberpunk thriller. I mean, I'm sorry. That was the name of the song.
I think I've used up all of the hell I can use for now. But who knows? Down the line, maybe I'll find something from Michael Bross that he's composed or written not for video games, and it'll be eligible for the show. So
interesting, cool.
But at the end of every episode, we're going to take a listener request.
Oh, sweet.
So, Chris, start thinking of some jams you might want to feature on the show. We're going to do like a VGM jukebox kind of testimonial deal. So we'll have we'll have an email address that you can shoot us some song suggestions too. So that'll be fun.
I first got angry and thought about death when I heard this song.
Exactly. This song increased my depression instead of helping with it. Hope you enjoy it. Nah, it's not all gloom and doom with industrial. A lot of it's really good stuff.
It's not. That was a goof.
Yeah, exactly. So speaking of which, VG Embassy, you can find us at thevgembassy.com. And from there, you'll find links to both my Patreon site and a Discord link where there's an instant Discord invite you can come in and check out. We've got tons of people talking about video game music, everyday stuff, posting links to their favorite video game music tracks, active all day, every day. It's a lot of fun. You can find me on Twitter at the VG Embassy. And we're on Stitcher, we're on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere where quality podcasts are sold and downloaded. Speaking of Patreon, I'd like to thank our Patreon patrons at the Taurus level: Cameron Childs, aka Bruce Irons of the Mad Gear Band, Michael Bridgewater from Forever Sound Version, Donovan Orofino, Chris Murray, and Bedroth. Our VG emissaries: Chris Myers, John Jekyll, aka Mixix Master, Ben the Dyad Dishman from The Dyad Presents, a VGM podcast, and Chris Steenerson from the VGJam podcast. I don't know, you should probably check out his show, though. It's pretty good.
All right.
Jordan Worma from the Table to Stage podcast, Volt Supreme, and David Parrish. Our audio attaché members: Cameron Worma, Carlos from the Heroes 3 podcast, Scott McElhone, and Dan Lawton. And our VG ambassador, of course, the patron saint of VGM podcasts, Alex, the Messenger from The Messenger Presents, a VGM Journey podcast.
That's a good
what a
one.
mouthful.
I've been listening to that one.
Yes, it is. He's been doing, it will be done by now, but he's been doing daily 12 Days of Christmas podcast releases, little 8 to 5 minute short Christmas podcasts, which have been a lot of fun to listen to. So he's got some good ideas for just starting out. He's really unique show.
For sure. His picks are primo. I've enjoyed the songs he's picking.
Yeah,
every one of them.
Very, very good taste.
Yeah.
So keep an eye out for that one. All right, Chris, thank you again so much, and please extend my thanks to Matt as well for showing up, at least for the first part of the show.
It has been a pleasure.
And like I said, we've got plans, and hopefully we'll get together and either do more point-and-click adventures, or we'll come up with a different theme to do as well in the near future.
Sounds good.
All right, everybody. So we will see you in 2 weeks for another episode of the VG Embassy. Happy New Year. Peace out.
Bye.
Thank you.